Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. We're the biggest freewheeling live streaming poetry podcast on the planet, in your ear and on your laptop. Today's guest for episode number 290 is Dave Newman, this year's winner of the Rattle Poetry Prize Reader's Choice Award. He'll be here in about 10 minutes. Before we get in, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry, and I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring that bell for notifications. Wherever you're watching this, whenever you're watching this, there's something you can click. You could leave a review. Whatever you do can help poetry be blasted all over the place, and that's always our goal here, so help us out with that mission. Now, we're going to start out with our Poets Respond poets, and we have two this week, which is the first time in, a few weeks or months maybe, that we've had two. There's so many great poems coming in, and there's two that I really loved and decided to just go for it. So we have, first off, we have a poem that you all read this Sunday's Poem of the Day by Pamela Lucinda Moss, and then we have an extra bonus poem by Molly Fisk, who's a past guest on the Rattlecast. That's going to come out on Tuesday, given that today's Easter, and happy Easter to everybody who celebrates too. By the way, I think maybe not everybody could make it as often as they can, and neither Molly or Pamela could be here today, but we're going to share their poems anyway. Okay, so here's the first one. This is today's Poem of the Day on Rattle. This is The Library's Roof is a Meadow. And this is what Pamela had to say about it. I've been feeling heartbroken lately by everything, really. And one of the ways I've been coping is by writing love notes to the things I do not want to lose. When I heard about the massive funding cuts to libraries, I thought of the librarians who've quietly and consistently cared for our communities. This poem is for them, for libraries, for immigrants, for LGBTQ plus people, and for everyone in this country trying to show up with tenderness and courage, standing together to protect what's most sacred and most at risk. And I just love the way this poem uses language, the way that the language of the day that we're sort of that's making such an impact on us creeps into the poem, and it's a beautiful use of that. So let's hear it. This is Pamela Lucinda Moss reading today's poem. Oops, hang on one second. I didn't do that right. Okay, now we'll do it. Here is Pamela Lucinda Moss reading The Library's Roof is a Meadow.
She says no, and I wonder if she wants to talk about my bibliographic record, or just... The library's roof is a meadow. When the librarian knocks at my door, I ask if she has a warrant that's been signed by a judge. She says no, and I wonder if she wants to talk about my bibliographic record, or discuss my requests for interlibrary loans. I have long sought asylum in the stacks that border on the self-help section, found sanctuary in the shelves that carry the 158.9s. But honestly, since the pandemic, I've resettled in the digital land of Libby that lacks the concept of overdue status. When your time is up, that's it. Your items are just disappeared. I haven't seen you in a while, the librarian says, but I've been thinking about how I used to check you out and catalog your cards that were so green, like the eco-friendly grass on the library's roof, that naturalized meadow. And I've been wondering if you'd shelve your solitude and join me there in solidarity, because a place of renewal should be everybody's birthright. And I miss your astonishingly undocumented circulating love.
Yeah, so it's such a beautiful poem. Again, that was The Library's Roof is a Meadow by Pamela Lucinda Moss. And now we're going to take a look at Tuesday's poem as well. So this is by Molly Fisk, who's writing about a similar topic, but sort of a different take on that topic too. This is what so many people are writing about. We had several hundred submissions this week, and Molly had to say this about her poem. Here we go with Molly Fisk. Molly said, I'm having a hard time believing Senator Chris Van Hollen actually did meet Kilmar Abrego Garcia, despite several photos of them together and announcements by so many news sources. This hasn't happened to me before, but I've read bits and pieces of Hannah Arendt's On Tyranny and heard of the concept, misquoted apparently all over social media. I'm trying to feel how this feels and understand it better in myself, and, as usual, writing poems is how I make sense of everything. also nature and movement. So I'm headed out now into the higher foothills for a walk. And this poem is Growing Cynical by Molly Fisk, and she talks about how difficult it is to believe anything these days, which is something that I can definitely relate to. I've felt like that for a long time. And here's Molly Fisk reading Growing Cynical.
Growing cynical. Sometimes lately, I don't believe it. The news, the grocery store flyer hawking deals on things I never buy. Any speed limit, weather report, my weight on the scale, even my bills. I say to myself, a likely story. Or, you've got to be kidding. Hannah Arendt wrote about this, how the lies are not meant to fool us, but teach us in time to not believe anything. Well, it's working on me, Hannah. I didn't snap. I floated away into some sort of muted universe where my brain isn't sharp and doesn't care. I'm back in a middle-class San Francisco childhood, walking our beagle Skipper up to the corner, around to the flat part of the block, and turning again while she smells invisible neighborhood news from curb and driveway until I tug the leash and say, come. She is a good dog and comes. I can feel the edge of a fog bank far out at sea, waiting.
And once again, that was Molly Fisk reading her poem, Growing Cynical. If you're interested in Molly, she was on Rattlecast number 61 to find more about her. So go back and take a look at that episode. That's also going to be Tuesday's Poem of the Day at Rattle.com. If you're not signed up for the daily poem at Rattle.com, all you got to do is go there, Rattle.com, and at the bottom, you'll see sign up for our daily poem by email. Just type in your email address there, and you'll get that in your inbox at 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time every morning. It's a new poem, sometimes Poets Respond, sometimes poems from our recent issues, sometimes poems from our archives, but always something great. So make sure you do that if you haven't yet. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Dave Newman. So sit tight and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Dave Newman. He's the winner of the 2024 Rattle Poetry Prize Reader's Choice Award. And that was that poem, I'm Trying to Lead This Old-Timey Veteran, which received the most votes of any from our winter 2024 issue. And so a lot of great notes, too, on why people picked that poem. But such a poem with, heartfelt, straightforward writing that really moved people. And so we appreciate that. Dave's also worked as a truck driver, a bookstore manager, an air filter salesman, a house painter, and a college teacher, among other things, if you can believe it or not. Dave is the author of 7 books, including several novels. The Poem Factory, which is right here. The Slaughterhouse Poems was named one of the best books of the year by Elle magazine. Winner of numerous awards, including the Andre Dubus Novella Prize. He lives in Trafford, Pennsylvania, the last town in the Electric Valley, with his wife, the writer Lori Jakiela, and their 2 children. And here he is, Dave Newman. Hey, Dave, it's so great to meet you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, I love the Reader's Choice Award, first of all, because it's an opportunity for me to, you don't really know anything unless you can make predictions and then see if they come true. you know?
Right.
So I love like testing my own knowledge of our audience and the readers and saying like, who's probably going to win this one? And my money was on you. And it definitely pulled true this time. So it's really fun to meet you and talk to you in that regard. And then your books are so fun too. I love, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but I love that your next book's called Better Than Best American Poetry. So I have to talk about that title. But do you want to start out reading a poem from the Poem Factory?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's some core poems in Poem Factory about working as a mover for a moving company. So I'm going to read some of those to start off. This one's called The Cops Show Up. The cops show up in riot gear with automatic weapons and spike the boss of the moving crew to the ground like he's a football. The air leaves the boss's lungs like a small tornado blowing across an open Pennsylvania field, and he squirms and sucks for air while the cops handcuff his wrists. This either has something to do with drugs or the boss's wife or some misunderstanding from a previous life, or perhaps the cops have the wrong guy. The boss can finally breathe, but the cops still shout maniacally, shout so the rest of us to move to the truck until another bigger boss shows up to send us home without getting paid. I drive to my apartment and skip dinner. I think about cops. I think about bosses. That night, I open one of my favorite novels and read this line. Last night, Boris discovered that he was lousy. The cops are Boris. The bosses are Boris. I'm Boris. You're Boris too. Admit it.
Yeah, and so that was The Cops Show Up from Dave Newman's book, The Poem Factory. And a great cover of this book too, with this factory springing out of somebody, I assume Dave's mind.
Right. Yeah, the publisher did a great job with that.
Yeah, really wonderful. So tell us, I'm always curious about poets' backgrounds and how they get into poetry, but especially when the poets have done so many different things. You know, you talk to poets a lot of the time, and what they did in life was when I was 12, I fell in love with poetry, knew I wanted to be an English major, and then I got an MFA, and then I climbed up the little rungs from an adjunct into a tenure track, and sort of this pattern. But you have a very different trajectory, and I'm curious, when you fell in love with poetry, and all the different things you've done. How did your love of poetry blossom through that ground?
Well, I have some of that. I mean, I did do the adjunct thing and the various things going through that, but I really didn't come from a very literate background. Neither of my parents are readers. My dad has a sixth grade education. Like, he's a super smart guy, just didn't have a lot of opportunities. He dropped out of school when he was 12 to his dad got diagnosed with schizophrenia, so he could get a job to buy his dad coffee and cigarettes at the hospital, which I think to me is just, when I was 12, I wanted to ride my bike down cliffs, like totally different vibe and different experiences. So we weren't a very literate family, but I always loved English. And there was a Corey Hart song in the early 80s called Never Surrender. And I was watching it on Friday night videos one night. And I was like, I could write a poem based on that. And like rushed out of bed and wrote a poem called Never Surrender, never let go. Our love is young and will grow. And like, I turned it in for English class, and it was just really exciting. And I always kind of wrote poetry after that. Didn't know poetry books existed. We didn't do contemporary poetry in high school at all. Maybe Edgar Allan Poe would be the closest thing to something contemporary. So really, not contemporary at all, and just kind of stayed with it and kept writing, and eventually made it into college. And someone gave me, Toy Derricott gave me a book of poems by Phil Levine, and it really just kind of hit all the right spots. I could recognize my world in Levine's poetry, and yet it was still very poetic, and I could recognize the artfulness of it even as a young reader.
Yeah. Do you remember the impulse that drove you to write that first poem? I mean, like, what was that? It's such a strange reaction to have to.
Well, I mean, it's a Corey Hart song.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm just glad they weren't playing like I wear my sunglasses at night, but it was like something came over me. I mean, it really is just something that you deeply connect with and kind of just turns your brain to fire. I think when you first start reading in those years, that's all you want to do when you first dig into poetry, and the reading inspires writing. And back then that was pre-phone. So I always had a notebook near, was scribbling something on my forearm or a post-it note or something. So it was always, there was that connection. As soon as I found a new book, there was something exciting to write about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's hear another poem, Dave. Next up, I think we had Hello Piano, another moving poem.
Yeah, another moving poem. Hello, piano. Hello, piano. I'm sorry you weigh 800 pounds. I'm sorry your legs are skinny as a wimp. I'm sorry there's nowhere to grab, piano. I lift weights and jog, and you are so fat. I'd like to fight you drunk in a bar, piano. I'd be like, the fuck are you looking at? But you are owned by a 16-year-old girl who loves Elton John and Billy Joel, and whose grandma loves Beethoven, and whose father built this house with a music room and sound curtains, and who built the next house, a mansion with a larger music room with thicker sound curtains and a lower ceiling, and who must surely have $20 bills like seeds in his pocket he'd like to plant in the working class garden of my life. You and I are the same piano. We are both about to get broken. We're both about to get played.
Yeah. So as everyone says, a great opening to that poem, and so much energy throughout. Such a fun name. It was Hello Piano by Dave Newman from his book, The Poem Factory. And so the jobs you've done, one of them, which wasn't listed in the bio, is a mover, I guess, too. Were you aware, because it feels to me, and we talk about this sometimes, that way that you go about being an English major and then being, a grad student and then a professor, and then you're on the right committees and things, and that whole, academization, that careerism that comes into poetry so often since it became part of our institutions, and that's where poetry is mostly housed. Doing so many other jobs, is that something that you consciously wanted to do? Because you see so many people that have nothing to write about, kind of like they find that spark that you did with the Corey Hart song, and then they want to replicate the feeling, and yet they haven't lived like a real life full of things to write about. And so there's sort of this struggle that you see a lot in submissions in particular. They're like grasping for topics. And having, one of the advices that I've heard people give and think of myself, although I don't know if I'm ever that harsh, is like, go live a life first. Right. Go do something else and then come back. And you've got to do that by doing so many different things. Is that something you were consciously aware of or not?
Yeah, I was consciously aware that I didn't want to do those things, which is why I went to poetry school. But I just looked like such an anomaly at the time. I think when I was in graduate school, I was the only straight working class guy in the program. So I was kind of just this oddball. And it was really, I kind of figured out after my first year that this probably wasn't the smartest thing for me to do, to get an MFA and to go in that direction. But I still wanted to teach and still wanted to have that opportunity. So I just kind of, but also when you go into everyone, I was from the era when everyone's like, get a liberal arts degree. You can work in a bank with it. People will love it. And when you go into an interview with a poetry degree, they're like, why did you get a poetry degree? Nobody wants this. This is useless. So it was not whatever Forbes magazine was telling parents at the time, go and get these liberal arts degrees. People want people who can think. And it's they don't. They want people who are trained, who have a specific skill that applies to the job. So I didn't particularly want to do those things, but I had been doing them. I'd worked in the Slaughterhouse and a paint store while I was in high school, and worked all through college. And so it just kind of was a continuation with that. And then a lot of things just kind of dropped away. I was a retail store manager. I managed a Pier 1. And as soon as the internet started coming around, it closed down. And so a lot of jobs that just common jobs people had just kind of fell away. So we just kind of end up changing careers one after the other. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get my first permanent teaching job until 3 years ago. So I was 50 when I actually got into the academy permanently.
Uh-huh. Do you find in the time since then that it's more difficult to write? Because one of the things I found when I was younger, I worked summer jobs and a lot of, in factories. I worked in a safe factory, pouring the concrete into safes. Right. I did a job cutting dye, for cycling blocks on washing machines at a factory one time. I worked at Eastman Kodak. I worked on a landscaping grounds crew, and those kind of jobs, I always felt like when I got home, I was just keyed up to write poetry. Like I was like so into it from like all the daydreaming and all with physical work. You do that. Like you're thinking of things or listening to things or reading books on your lunch break. And there was a hunger I had for writing and reading that then once I sort of fell into a job as an editor, it feels like it becomes work and it's like it's taking a long time to get over like that hump of like having the same joy while it's also work, And I imagine it's the same way, ending up teaching writing, right?
It is very much. I mean, I think the balance is you have these blocks of time to write when you're a teacher. You have Christmas break. So like as soon as finals week hits and I get the finals turned in, I'm writing then, and summer's coming soon and there's that. But it definitely was a shift. And we teach a lot where I teach. We teach a 4-4 with 4 preps, and most places I think teach a 2-2, something like that. So, and we have a lot of advising and stuff. So yeah, it's just being in front of a computer all the time, or, prepping for poetry class or fiction class. So, we teach I'll teach creative writing, poetry, fiction, or creative nonfiction. So yeah, it totally like kind of squashes my desire to write during the school year in a way that I would come home from cutting grass or being a janitor or even working as a truck driver. And it just seemed like the world was coming at you. And as long as I was reading, it keeps you engaged. And I think noticing the world in a really specific way. And I think kind of non-intellectual jobs and reading go hand in hand really well in a way that maybe doing things with your brain during the day, you come home just kind of with nothing left and want to stream zombies and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, your brain like is a muscle and that gets tired, And,
Totally.
And your body's a ton of muscles and they get tired, but then your brain can still be firing. So I kind of,
Right.
But I do wonder if I romanticize those days, like, because it's like, maybe I was just young and hungry as a poet, and I really wanted to read and consume everything and write every day. And, and maybe that was just a romantic notion that it had to do with what I was doing outside of it.
I think that is. And I think, we didn't have the internet back then to know what people were reading or how well they read. I mean, I remember like I was 23 when I went to grad school and I was going for poetry, but I knew I wanted to take some fiction classes too. And I was like, I haven't read enough Russians yet. I need to read more Russians. I'd read like 2 Dostoevsky books and I just felt like I was the biggest dummy on the planet. But then I got there and nobody had read the Russians yet or anything like that. So it wasn't like, I imagine everybody coming from Ivy League schools, and I'd come from like a community college and a branch campus and was going to be totally the dummy of the room, but everyone was pretty well on the same journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's true. Well, let's hear another poem. Next up, what do we have next? It's
Frank O'Hara works hard by not working.
There you go. Yeah. Well, that's a good poem. Good segue into that one.
Frank O'Hara works hard by not working. Frank O'Hara carries furniture with great style, mostly by asking other people to carry the furniture for him, then leaning against the wall and looking good in khakis and a t-shirt. The boss sometimes says, "Hey, Frank, get the fuck to work." But Frank does not get to work. Frank sneaks off to write poems while the boss quietly weeps into his leather gloves. We think the boss loves Frank O'Hara and cannot accept that everyone loves Frank O'Hara. We carry so much furniture just to get Frank O'Hara to love us, but sometimes the boss falls down in his sadness and Frank O'Hara says, "Oh, Lana Turner, we love you, get up." Then we love Frank O'Hara even more. Frank O'Hara is a small, skinny man who smokes cigarettes for breakfast and drinks glass bottles of Coke for lunch. He once gave a loading crew this advice: if someone's chasing you down the street with a knife, you just run and don't turn around and shout, "Give it up, I was a track star from Manola Prep." One time, we thought Frank was going to carry a framed picture, a pen and ink drawing of what was either a female vampire or Dracula as a cat, but instead of picking it up, he pointed and said, "Is this an Edward Gorey? I love Edward Gorey." Nights when we are too exhausted to dream, Frank O'Hara heads off to the beach, to bonfires and great love affairs with beautiful men. So we sleep restlessly, jealous and waiting for the next great story. But because of darkness and dune buggy traffic, we worry endlessly.
Yeah, that's a great poem.
Thank you.
Once again, that was Frank O'Hara, Works Hard by Not Working. A great title, too. So you can see how much, in just these 3 poems already, how much playfulness you have. Like, you feel a real sense of joy in your writing process, where you're like having have an idea and then you run with it and have fun with the topics. Is that accurate for how your writing process works?
Yeah, Very much so. And I mean, I think a lot of it came from literally reading on those labor jobs we're talking about. You'd have lunch breaks and you're the weirdo sneaking off to like read a book of poems while everyone else is sitting around eating their PB&J sandwiches and things like that. So, sometimes drafts of poems like that come from literally on the job and just being so engaged with reading at a physical time and just how exciting it could be to merge those two things.
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever, in those kind of jobs, did you ever find a way to read while working? Because that's something that I remember trying to do frequently.
I mean,
Like
definitely
yeah.
difficult for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I had a janitor's job for a couple of years when I got out of undergraduate, and they would lock us into a hardware store at night. And so it had to be, nobody could leave once you were in there. So there'd be like a stocking crew, and then there'd be a cleaning crew, and we'd clean the bathrooms and strip the floors and all of that and stuff like that. But usually in that job, there was time to crawl up into like they had those rolls of carpet and astroturf, and you could literally like crawl up into them and hide between two rolls and take a book, and there'd still be enough light to read. So you could kind of separate yourself from your crew, and while everyone else is kind of bullshitting or smoking or something, you could go off and actually read a little bit. So, but other than that, it can be difficult for sure. You know.
Yeah. Well, I one time, one of the things I remember the job I mentioned doing making cycling blocks for the washing machines.
Yeah.
One of the jobs we had to just stamp the company logo on with a stamp, and I thought if I could just like out of the corner of my eye, and then there was a button that I could hit with my elbow, so I'd be like this stamping. And like doing a terrible job, and yet trying to. I remember I was reading Vonnegut, so I was like either like Cat's Cradle or something,
Right.
trying to read, and then like jamming the thing in my thumb and realizing, oh, this is not a good idea.
Well, your story's not like people reading on assembly lines, like grabbing two lines and putting a tire on, and reading two lines and putting a tire on.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know, just good times. So do you feel like, I mean, so many of your poems, we'll see more in the future, do have that working class consciousness. It feels like you're speaking for a lot of the people you meet that, aren't spending their time writing poems generally. How much do you think about that? There was an era, you mentioned Phil Levine, and a lot of what Phil Levine did for Detroit and for the workers there was about raising consciousness about that working class life. But you don't see that as something that's as popular nowadays as it was and for a little window maybe. And do you feel like that's sort of sadly fallen out of the wayside, and that you feel like you're speaking for that demographic intentionally?
Well, I mean, I've pretty much felt working class my whole life because, I did labor jobs growing up and then went to college to get out of labor jobs, which Western Pennsylvania, again, really depressed in the 80s when I graduated high school and the 90s when I graduated college. So it just seemed like, and I wasn't a very good fit for poetry or artistic jobs at the time. That just wasn't like, it wasn't good to be a working class guy at the time. Nobody wanted that around. So I just kind of kept following. I'd educate myself. And then, I was undergraduate and then I'd be a janitor. And then I was graduate school and I'd be a truck driver. And so it just kind of lined up that way. I mean, I tried just to speak to my own experience and my own imagined experiences and things. But when I was coming of age, I think there were still a round of professors who had worked in factories in the summers. Like their dads had good union and factory jobs, and they always hire, teenagers or college students to when people go on vacation to cover those. So there was the couple of anthologies. You remember like Peter Orezik and Nick Coles had a couple anthologies, I think, at the time, like The Working Life or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So they were out there. And there were still what they called pink collar books at the time. Do you remember that? Like it was like a secretary or something. It was pink collar, which was supposed to be different than blue collar in a certain way. Yes, I read that and I love that and I love to write it. And it has definitely fallen away. I just read a book by Joy Priest called Horsepower, and she's a professor down at Pitt, Maine, which is the main campus. I teach at a little branch campus, and it was cool to see. She had a bunch of poems about she grew up in Kentucky and lived right outside the track where the Kentucky Derby was run, and like they would rent plots of land to people pulling up in these fancy cars with their bonnets and their drinks and everything. And so it was about, working as an 8-year-old and selling parking spaces to rich people. And I was really happy to see that because you just don't see as much of it coming from university presses as you used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's definitely true. Well, let's hear another poem.
Okay. This is called To the Women in the, this is a long one. I have to pull up the actual poem to. So the title is a little longer than the poem. This is called To the woman in the grocery line who complains about the man in front of us because he wears Nike shoes and pays for his groceries with food stamps. It's possible that he, like many intelligent consumers, bought the shoes on sale.
Yeah, that's a funny one too. To the woman at the grocery line. Again, another poem from the Poem Factory, one of the older books by Dave Newman. Um, so, so what is your writing process like? Because one of the things reading through the Poem Factory and a few poems I've seen from the new book, there's a real sense of storytelling involved too. And I haven't read your nonfiction work, but I assume it's there too. There's a real arc to your poems, and there's a way that you're telling a story without being like flowery about it, without trying to add extra layers. You're like, I'm going to get to this. If you look at the poem from Rattle this winter, it's very short lines, getting to the point of what you were trying to feel, in writing the poem. And even though it was a longer poem on the page, it was a poem that moved really quickly through the story. So what can you tell us about how you approach that storytelling? Because that's something that I just, I see a lot of poems that sort of, wind around and around and don't really go anywhere. So it's really important to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for like the smallest story I can tell, if that makes sense. Even if sometimes it goes 8, 10, 20 pages, whatever it is, I'm still looking for like the specific moment, the tiniest moment that I can illuminate rather than like a bigger picture. So I'm always looking for the smallest thing, but then sometimes it expands into something broader, but I'm looking for like a specific moment that I can capture and within that develop characters. And then also I'm just looking for different ways to tell stories, because I mean, a whole book of narrative poems with every poem's the same length and the same style can get old too. I know, like, some occasionally it works. There's a David Kirby book I love. I think it was just when he kind of switched to the more style he uses currently, House of Blue Light, and it's like every poem's like maybe 4 pages and jumps around and stuff, and it works really great. But I think, if you stay with that, it can kind of go flat in that space. So you're always looking for different ways. Does the image tell the story? Does the title still tell the story? Does the story happen in the poem? But I really am interested in things that stem from like the speaker or in the character or the narrator rather than the author, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not so much into the author behind the scenes pushing things around. I really like it like when I feel like the person on the page is all there is. That's all I'm getting. There's no one kind of moving things around or manipulating it at all.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense of where the story is going, like while you're writing? Or are you following the thread of the character and you don't know? Because I think that's one of the things. You have to have surprise. You have to be, you have to be pushed in some new direction you didn't realize. But then at the same time, that's why people end up spinning their wheels so much and not going anywhere, because you're waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I have an idea where I want it to go, but it usually doesn't go there at all. And sometimes the note I have for the poem when I sit down to write, I might not even remember coherently or exactly recall in the perfect way. So you trust your imagination to fill in those details and those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, part
Yeah.
of that is definitely the exploring is a big part of it and the exciting part for me.
Mm-hmm. Is it a lot of drafts and a lot of trimming back to get the poems as concise as there?
Yeah, I think of it more like, rather than trim back, like accordion style, like, and I pull the poem the whole way out and then I squeeze the poem the whole way back and then I kind of pull it out and back and forth. So I take a lot of time between drafts. Like, I didn't have any success early in life. So I just had a lot of years to write and rewrite. So I kind of figured out, especially with longer pieces, longer poems and prose pieces, that ego's really big when you write and you think something's great. And that's kind of hard to control. You have to be invested and excited by it and believe it's going to pay off. But if you can write that and believe you're the greatest writer in the history of the world in that moment and set it aside, and you can go back to the other piece that you wrote before that, where you were the greatest writer, and you're like, oh, that fucking sucks now. I realize it, but it doesn't matter because I've got this new one I wrote that's great. That's going to save me and get me attention and get readers and stuff. So I can work on this one as much as I want. Then you finish that and set it aside, and you go back to something else. And you're like, oh, well, this is terrible, but it doesn't matter because I just revised this. So it was always just kind of tricking myself in a writing thing. But I just noticed like the further away from it And the more I had invested in my current pieces, the easier it was to revise and cut things out and throw things away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me of something someone said. I can't remember who it was, but that they like to never have anything finished. Like there's always something that was unfinished, so that when they were so frustrated about what they were working on now, they could go over the thing. And it feels kind of like that, where it's like it keeps you going. And is that a thing that prevents writer's block for you? Is to have something to go back and look at the revision process?
I think so, yeah. Like I really, if I know it doesn't have to be perfect, and I think that's probably where writer's block comes from for some people, just as you want to make everything that's in your head come out as accurately as possible. And I just kind of accept that that's not there's a process between the two that I need to have it on the page so that my brain can actually see it and then revise it later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've been reading poems from the Poem Factory, and your poems, your books of poems, do always have interesting titles, and I'm wondering how the construction of those books came to be. Was there a reason why certain poems appear in the order they do in this book? How was it organized?
Yeah, I think with this one, I wanted to have a guy. It starts with a guy working in like a warehouse, a box loading warehouse, where he's a supervisor. And after work, he goes, and how did you get beer? And I'm drinking water, you bastard. It looks so good. So the guy starts and he's working in a factory, and after his shift, he goes out and does drugs. And it's kind of just about a person working through various jobs, which unfortunately I think so many of us have to do now. Like I grew up, I have a friend whose dad worked for Nabisco. He wasn't a higher up or anything. He just had a sales rep job, but he was just like, he knew he could count on his company and that job was going to be there for him. And he worked there 30 years and, it was solid, good retirement, everything. And just, I've never known that. Most of the people from my generation that come from blue collar backgrounds don't know that. And so I think it's meant to show a guy just going through, working as a builder, working as a store manager, but simultaneously, like during downtimes and things with frustration, there's additional drug use and things like that. So it's kind of structured around someone working through drugs and hard jobs that aren't really paying off one after the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what the thing I was thinking about reading the book is the way that it's sort of an amalgam of characters. Like it feels like it's like everybody and you and multiple people, but only one person, like all at once, which is a fascinating way to progress through the book.
Thanks. I really like, even in fiction books and stuff, I like voices that are really close to me. And so I try to replicate that. So it sounds like someone talking to you that you can trust,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's necessary, especially some of the subject matter that I deal with is not always, appropriate, pretty. I'm not sure what the right word is. So you want to have a speaker you can trust when you're talking about things that maybe people don't talk about as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's read the last poem we're going to share today from the book. Everyone is broke and horny.
Right. All right. Everyone is broke and horny. I'm eating her pussy in the alley with her skirt up and her panties down and my tongue on her clit, though sometimes up inside her, which is not easy to do considering the angles and the alley. And it's a lot of fun, seriously, a really great time. But I'm in shorts on concrete and there are these little pebbles grinding into my knees. And I wish I had a better apartment, one with a landlord who's not spy on every person I bring home. I wish she wasn't 43 and living with her mom.
Yeah, and that was Everyone is Broke and Horny. Get another poem from the Poem Factory. And you do, we were talking about with storytelling and the sense of arc in the poems, that one of the things that accomplishes that is having a clear sense of the ending. Each poems feel like, that's the ending when you get to the ending. How do you write toward that? And how do you know where the ending is?
I think it's different with every poem, even if they are kind of similar stylistically. Sometimes they're building towards something. I used to, when I was really young, I didn't imagine writing quite as much. And so I would try to end every poem with a different word. So I was always looking for like a hard noun or something that would really bring it on home, which became impossible as like you started writing more even to keep track of and things like that. But that was like one of the rules I set out for myself when I was first writing, like every poem will have a different ending. And I really like Jerry Loughlin's poems, California writer from Long Beach. I always thought he had some really, really great endings. He could really stick his endings and come up with some witty lines. So that was appealing to me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had a tribute to Jerry Loughlin back because Clint Margrave edited that collected poems of his for New York Quarterly Books.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he was on like a year ago or 2 years ago or something. Yeah, but yeah, so maybe we can check out that for Jerry Loughlin's endings. But yeah, he's one of those prolific poets who who seems to figure out how to stick the landing for sure.
I remember trying to ask him like about, it was kind of obviously he didn't revise, but it kind of just about his process. And he was kind of just like, well, you'll just keep writing the poem till you get the poem. And I guess that made sense too back then, there are, for that generation, just that you could do that. You could write a poem 5 different times and stick it out there. And one of them, someone will recognize one and put it in a book. And I mean, the best Jerry books I always thought were when he had a serious editor. Donna Hilbert did a collection of his. And when someone really got in there and pulled out, took 400 poems and pulled them down to 85 pages or whatever. I thought those were the best collections for him.
Yeah, I agree. Well, your next book up is it's coming out this summer, I believe, in June.
Yep.
It's called Better Than the Best American Poetry, which is a great title. So how did that title come to be, first of all?
Just I think a chance to make fun of poetry, because I don't think poetry makes fun of itself quite enough as it should. And I think just there's always controversy surrounding poetry. Everybody's trying to tell somebody how to behave morally, and there's always that kind of component. It seemed like when I was in grad school for poetry, there was always like some angle that someone should be controlling someone else or telling someone what they should write about and stuff like that. So it was a chance to kind of just, at a time when we're talking about diversity, and instead you have a bunch of poetry professors all in the same book and stuff. It just seemed kind of silly that everybody in poetry has the same job who gets attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it definitely is, and that's a really frustrating aspect of it. That just that poets, unless it's sort of entering academia like that, it becomes a kind of game, really a pyramid scheme where the higher up on the ladder you get, the more influence you get to wield, and then you get the reciprocity of that, and it's a really frustrating way to go. I mean, the truth about Best American Poetry for Rattle is that if it's the editor is a poet that I've interviewed, we end up with poems in there.
Right.
And if it's a poet that we haven't interviewed, I don't. and yet it calls itself Best American Poetry. And I don't know, there's just a frustrating way. Or the same deal with the Pushcart Prize anthology. It's who knows who, even if it's just, the most well-meaning. It's just, these are the people I happen to know, and I like this guy. Oh, I saw that poem, I liked it. There's still a very closed, insular way it actually functions that we tend to forget about, which is very frustrating, I'd say.
It is. And I mean, it's even I think probably in the best of circumstances, really difficult to set out to do what they do. I mean, you could have 2 people talking about poetry and not even talking about the same thing anymore. You could be talking about formal poetry or the button poets or people on Copper Canyon or whatever. It could be so diverse in its style and content and form. We might not even be talking about the same thing. So it's an impossible task that doesn't get handled very well.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it for sure. Speaking of that, though, how do you define poetry for yourself? Like what makes something a poem? Having written, different genres too, and taught different things. Like what's the difference between a poem and because it's easy when it's formal poetry and has meter and rhyme and things like that to say, oh, this is poetry. But then we always get those comments, oh, this is prose with line breaks, and yet there's a difference. So how do you define a poem? What is a poem?
I don't know if I do define a poem. What was the Supreme Court justice who was like about the pornography case? I don't know obscenity, except when I see it, I recognize obscenity. And the line break thing, I remember reading that about Phil Levine, who at the time would have been one of the more well-crafted poets I would have been reading. Because I would have been reading like meat poets, like William Watling and Lynn Lifshin and people from that generation. So Levine seemed to me very formal, very revised for a free verse, as most of his later work is all free verse and stuff. So I don't know, I think it's just this idea of capturing the tiniest thing imaginable in the most accurate way possible, just catching these moments that we don't normally recognize. I think as anybody knows, when you're reading poetry, at least for me, I start seeing the world in a very different way, like the tiny little moments or the things I pass, the plants I pass, the houses I pass, they suddenly seem to mean more and have different definition and something that I can use in a poem in a way that if I'm not reading poem or I'm overwhelmed, I don't see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's a good definition, I'd say. At this point in the show, I should say to everybody out there, if you haven't clicked the like button yet, please do. Really helps. There are more than twice as many people watching live as have clicked like so far. And if I remind you, then more people click like, and then it gets shown to more people on the little sidebar of YouTube. Same way in Facebook and all that too. So make sure you click the like button. That ratio really matters. And also, if you have any questions for Dave, leave them in the chat windows either on Facebook or YouTube. It helps, like some great questions already, and it helps if you put it in question to lead off the comments so that I can see that it's a question just flipping through. But if you have any questions, I'll pass them along. In the meantime, let's hear a poem from the new book, Dave, the one forthcoming, the Better Than Best American Poetry, the bold claim. Let's hear a poem from there.
That's just asking for a kick right there. So I'm going to read a poem called Poem for Charles Bukowski and Anzia Izierska, two of my favorite writers. Outside, poverty, the smell of the city, trash. You're born in the ghetto, and your father says, no woman can live without a father or a husband to look out for her. Or you're born during the Depression, and your father, who can't find work, beats you with a razor strap until the skin on your back cracks, bleeds, and your mother watching says, the father is always right. After that, freedom, individuality, the library, more poverty, endless poverty, a little education at the city college, maybe a degree in teaching. At 17, you get a job in a laundry, you sell fish in the streets, or you hit the road from LA to Philadelphia, find jobs in a dog biscuit factory or Western Union, stock boy at an auto parts store. What does any of it matter except to say nobody starved to death and there was always enough paper? Through spite and through love, the words came. The class you were born into barely reads, let alone writes, but suddenly there were books, stories and poems, novels about dirty New York, the Lower East Side, books about dirty Los Angeles. You iron shirts, you write it into your art. 11 years at the post office, make it a novel. There were lovers, children, one daughter each. The pull and push of family, writing, always family. In 1927, a jerkwad critic at the New York Tribune said this about Izierska: a complete and amusing ignorance of Gentile minds and somehow a faint lack of good taste. When Bukowski published his first novel in 1972, the New York Times was too ignorant to notice, too smart to care. None of it, of course, mattered in the least. If I believe in anything anymore, it's art, it's survival, it's the cost of being an individual. If I believe in anything anymore, it's the cost of finding beauty at all costs. Anzia Izierska and Charles Bukowski. The world looks like a jail until someone offers words.
Yeah, so that's a poem from the new book, Better Than Best American Poetry. That was Poem for Charles Bukowski and Anzia Izierska. Let's see. We did have a whole bunch of interesting questions too, Dave. Let me go back to that and pull some up. So one of the things, not in this poem, but in a previous poem, Dick Westheimer noticed, he says, could you address what's going on for you when you have those indented verses? They seem to appear pretty often, and they were for a few poems that were reading the book. So how do you format the poem on the page just more generally, and what are those indents representing?
I don't know. I think, I was overly compressing when I was younger, and when I was really young, wrote a lot of formal poems. And I think I had a hard time shaking the compression, and part of that was starting to maybe make the lines look different and get the white space on the page. And it felt like it just kind of could breathe a little more, and it felt a little more like a speaker talking than an author kind of overly compressing the poem. So I think it stemmed from that, and probably just from also seeing it in books that I loved over the years and wanting to replicate it in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And here's another question about craft too, from Kimberly Gibson Tran. She says, do you have a philosophy on making titles? What are your favorite poem titles? And you get some good titles that we've seen already. So what are your philosophies on that?
Yeah, my philosophies on titles. Years ago, I got there used to be like, the publisher clearinghouse, you get tapes and stuff like that. But there was another one you could get books from. And my brother signed up for that, and he gave me this like world poetry anthology, like this big hardback that he probably paid a penny for or whatever it was at the time. And I figured it was just going to be all kind of old timey things that, I could study, but not necessarily learn. But there was a form in there they were talking about. They kind of introduced sections of poems, and it was a Welsh form. I'm totally blanking on the title, but I guess like as far as Rome made their way up into Wales, and there would be like a headstone for, greatest Maximus lived here, and it would have like the thing, and then they would use the rest of the headstone to write and drank his own piss on his deathbed, and it would be like to take down people. So they would take these tombstones and use those as the titles, and then write the poem underneath that, kind of taking the air out of the Romans' grandiose vision of themselves. So I love the idea of that you could have these big titles with little poems attached to them.
Yeah, do you tend to have the title first, or do you find the title after you write the poem?
Almost always after, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's the process like that? Like just daydreaming about, where it might be, or do you, what goes into a good title?
Yeah, I think probably it goes with the poem first and foremost, trying to follow whatever the poem wants. Like, if a poem is really, usually my longer titles are more leading towards funnier things, I think. So to have a poem about someone in harm or something like that and have a really long zany title probably wouldn't work. So I guess it's just whatever the poem wants, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd feel obnoxious to have a whole book of poems with big long titles, so there's
Mm-hmm.
that.
So I wanted to ask about, we talked about earlier about, the way publishing poetry works. And somebody said in the chat window, something like, poetry is mostly marketing these days. And,
Right.
and it just, begs the question of what you're able to do for marketing. Like, how have you found your experience, publishing with small presses and getting poems out there? Is there anything that works? Because that's one of the things, the secret that very few people know going in, is that most books don't sell very many copies at all.
Right.
Like at the average small press book, it's still probably the case, if not worse, is 100. There's a survey,
Right.
secret survey for the industry that somebody did with a No-Tell Motel. There's a blog post about it years ago. But all the small press is talking about it. Like it's around 100 copies is a normal amount to sell, and which is sort of the dirty little secret. And it does make you, it takes sort of the air out of your tires a little bit thinking about that. But yet there are ways to get your work out there and share it. So how do you approach that like marketing side of it when it seems like you hate marketing and love the writing?
I really don't approach the marketing, to be honest with you. I try to, as I've gotten older, I try to be more accepting of things that are offered. Um, I don't know how well anything works. I was talking to the writer Ben Tanzer one time in a podcast, and he said, "You don't like to do these things." I said, "It's not that I don't like to do them. I just think my time's probably better spent writing, and the miracle that somebody finds it as opposed to getting out there." I'm real conscious that a lot of people don't read poetry, and it's just this real tiny group of us that love it, and we may even love different styles and types of poetry and stuff. So I don't know. I never seemed to me a way that you could really be that successful. I don't think I knew it would become as unsuccessful as it's come over the years, like the phones would take over and people would really quit reading and things like that. But I don't think I ever aspired to be a huge poet or anything like that. That didn't seem realistic to me.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is? I mean, one of the reasons you could give is that poetry isn't written for regular people. It's very lofty. After modernism, it became a something professors do.
Right.
Well, they drink wine with their pinky up or whatever, and
Right.
and yet blue collar poetry is there too. And if you sort of tie someone down into a chair and make them come to a poetry reading, and it's a blue collar type poet with a blue collar type person, they enjoy the poem, but then they don't carry on and read usually, and so why do you think it's difficult to get people to read poetry these days? What do you think the cause of that is? And I'm wondering too, if I'm sure you have tons of blue collar friends, like what's their reaction to your poems, and is it possible to turn them on to poetry somehow?
Yeah, I think there is, I do have blue collar friends, and they do read poetry, but it's probably a pretty limited circle, and then probably it might be something that I would recommend to them too, like, hey, you might like this, so check this out and stuff. But I think America likes to read full length things. If you look at the bestseller list, it's not going to be poetry and stories, it's going to be novels. People like, full length movies, they like whole seasons of series and stuff. So I think there's and I love poetry, but I don't love like flash fiction. Like I can pick up a book of poems and read 90 poems because the voice will carry me. I can't do like a collection of flash fiction that has 90 different narrators. I just don't want to restart that often. So maybe some of that applies to people who don't come to poetry, is maybe they want a full length collection and things like that. And I try to approach books as full-length works, even though it's not, like a novel would be or something like that, but each book should be different. I was looking at my bookshelf, and Bukowski, similar to Frederick Bartholomew, and I was like, Bartholomew is such a better writer than Bukowski. I can't remember what his books are about. Like I read this novel and this novel, and they just kind of merged. But I know like this Bukowski book has the love poems about the Scarlet, and this Bukowski is the novel about growing up. So it was really good about making the books really individual that you could remember in a way that someone who was a much better writer than him, at least stylistically, wasn't able to do. So it's
Hmm.
kind of this big stew of grabbing from everywhere you can, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting, thinking about that, because one of the things, maybe the main thing, for a longest time I only bought poetry books, and I hated buying like novels because poetry is the one thing you can go back to, and like that
Right.
was the joy of it, that you would want to, and sort of the point is to have something be so well written and so concisely insightful. That you want to go back and read it again, and I think there was the original impulse for poetry was to remember things,
Yeah.
and to the and so poetry is worth it being on your shelf because it's worth going back to, whereas like the stuff, if it's a novel I'm reading, I don't want to read it again for 20 or 30 years because I'll remember like the ending, but with a poem it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what the ending is, so it's just such an interesting comparison.
Well, I think it is, and I think like the poetry is such a good way to capture realism. I don't think we think of poetry the way we think of fiction and writing realism, but for me, it really is the best way to capture daily living. It doesn't need a plot. I mean, my joke as a teacher is, what's the difference between narrative and a plot? A narrative is somebody goes into the grocery store with $1.86 to buy a loaf of bread that's $2, and they get to the cashier, they don't have enough money, and they have to walk out. A plot is someone with a $1.86 goes in to buy a $2 loaf of bread. The cashier says you don't have enough money, and they stick a gun in the cashier's face. So it's like I want to see the really small things without the guns. It's just like if I turn on Netflix or Prime or HBO now, everything's guns.
Hmm.
Everything's shooting and shit. And poetry does not do that. It's these little tiny moments. When I watch The
Hmm.
Sopranos, I want to see how like Mr. and Mrs. Soprano raise their kids. I don't care who they're killing. Like I want the small little moments, that
Hmm.
I don't need the big thing of violence hanging over it.
Yeah, it's just so weird to me though. Like that's how I feel too. I mean, it's hard to watch. Like we every once in a while, and it's funny you mentioned Sopranos because me and Katie, we're trying to like it's like a night home. The girls aren't here. Let's watch a movie, and then we go through all these movies trying to find something, and usually it's either a movie we've already seen that's like 20 years old or more.
Yep.
Or it's Sopranos because we're still
Yes.
getting through. She hasn't seen the don't no spoilers. She hasn't seen the end yet.
Okay.
We're into season 6 right now. But it's like, but those things are so much value. And a movie is always like these, long, boring sex scenes and someone tied to a chair being tortured to get the
Right.
truth out of them. And it's just like all these like boring tropes or some action shot with like the camera flying around, making us dizzy. And there's only so many things it feels like that movies do. Why are people drawn to that? And not drawn. It's just that I'll probably die being baffled by this. But like, why don't people prefer the scene where the guy walks out without being able to buy the bread? Why do they want the gun? I don't understand.
I think like we can all agree that if someone sticks a gun in your face, it's dangerous and stuff. So like I think that's kind of like the cultural agreement we have that this matters if someone pulls out a gun, but it doesn't matter if someone can't be fed. We don't care about that in the same way. And in fact, we may have been dealing with those things during the day, and the last thing we want is to come and see that at the end of the day. But those are the things like films. Like I love this film Killer of Sheep, which is just a family, a poor black family in California, just working their jobs in a slaughterhouse. Or recently, was it Love Song with Dale Dolly? It was just about two 70-year-old high school friends meeting up at a campground to
Hmm.
find out that maybe they couldn't be together as boyfriend and girlfriend in their 70s, and like nothing happens. They skip rocks and play guitar, and that's what I want to see, and that's why I love poetry. Is it consistently delivers those little moments.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, really well said. That's what I'm here for too. Let's hear. We have 2 more poems you're going to share. Let's do the second to last poem.
This is called Beautiful American Songs. Beautiful American Songs. He said, "You really must read Neruda in Spanish. If I learned every language of every poet I loved, I'd never have the time to read any poetry, and the hole in my head would be the size of the midday sun. Neruda sings to me the way Neruda sings to me. I like it, and it doesn't take a doctorate to know that." He said, "English just doesn't capture the music." okay, I understand that we're a country of race car drivers, football fans, crooked politicians, and rock and roll reporters. But tell me that you don't love the sound of your own voice. Tell me that the word poontang isn't, in its beautiful American way, a song.
Yeah, another great song. There's beautiful American songs and perfect for what we were just talking about, too. From the forthcoming book by Dave Newman, Better Than Best American Poetry, which is available for pre-order right now. Let's see. A quick question from Jeff Stumpo. He says, Gene Kelly or Fred Astaire? I don't know what that means, but
I just go with Fred Astaire because my dad made me watch the movies when I was growing up. If I was homesick, we were watching a Fred Astaire movie.
Well, Jeff says you can say after, I have him pinned as a Gene Kelly guy, with the tap shoes driven to the floor rather than floating above it. So that's the difference. See, I don't know enough about them to know which one's which. So apparently, Fred Astaire floats and Gene Kelly stumps. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. I think there was another one too I wanted to pass along. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is the one. So Mark Grenier talks about this. Should poetry be difficult? And what is difficult? Which is it's a really interesting question, because one of the things, going back to that topic we were talking about, for why more people don't read poetry, one of the reasons is that it's a little difficult, even when it's easy. It's just the irony of it. Like when you know what it's about and there's no confusion or ambiguity there, it's still emotionally difficult to. It's something that's difficult to process, I guess. So anyway, but should poetry be difficult to you? I guess I was answering for you. You answer.
No, I don't think it should be difficult or not difficult. I think it can be whatever it wants to be in that space. I think just as long as you're conscious of what you're doing to readers, that maybe all readers don't want the difficult poems. My next book is filled with references to other writers, and I think they're self-defined, and I think people don't have to know the writers necessarily to get them, but you take that chance. Maybe reading about Joan Joe Smith and Fred Voss will be difficult to someone who's not familiar with small press poetry or something like that, or maybe because some of the poems are emotional in a certain way, like you said, that's a different form of difficulty. It's not, I think, always accessibility. There are other ways poems can be difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think that's really what I think too. I mean, my opinion is that it's difficult to have your sort of mental models and preconceptions challenged.
Right.
And I think that any good poetry, that's what it's actually doing, or really like what any art is actually doing. If it's art, that's almost like the definition to me. And it's not because I want it to be, it's just because you can look at the iterations of art and see what it has lasting meaning and value over time. And it's the stuff that moves people and makes them think in ways that they either don't want to think or didn't think before. It's like pushing the levels of what you thought. Even a funny poem, like there's something about humor that goes to that place as well. It's like, this is a thing that isn't expressed. And so, and so there's always this like way that it's pushing boundaries. And I think the problem is that we just, as time and technology progress, we less and less like boundaries. We're focused in having the things that we believe confirmed over and over and over again. And that's the thing that we like, because it feels, appealing and pleasant to have your preconceptions confirmed. I think that's the real problem.
Well, I think one of the things that really helps, especially young writers, is just like, you write good poems off bad books, or books you don't understand will be as inspiring as the books you love, and maybe more so because they bring out the frustration and the inaccuracies that you don't want in the world. And so sometimes those are as inspiring as the books that we love, where we just want to take in and not write and not necessarily engage the world, just stay with that book of poems a little longer and just enjoy the place it's providing for us.
Yeah. I read, or I guess it was Brendan Constantine I was talking to on this Rattlecast maybe, but he said that he loves books that he loves, and he loves books that he hates. Right. Because the books that he hates make him wants to write a different kind of poem, and then the books that he loves makes him want to write a different kind of poem. And either way, he wants to write a different kind of poem. And so that's the way he gets through life. Yeah,
that's a great approach.
There's another question, and this might be one that you have to be familiar with this, and I'm not again, but a question from Janet McConaughey. If you know Two Tramps in Mud Time, what do you think of the poem and Frost's statement? Do you know what she's talking about?
I don't. I'm not familiar with the poem.
Okay. Well, that's something to look up afterward. Yeah. Let me ask you too. You mentioned writing a lot of formal poetry in the past, and moving on to really free verse and really really heartfelt, direct kind of poems now. Do you have any impulse to go back to that? Is there something that formal poetry does maybe that free verse doesn't?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I needed it. I was really glad that I have, and I didn't know anything when I was taught it. So it was just, that was what put the poetry that was kind of given to me. I had Toy Darracott for an undergraduate class, and it was like, she was Toy Darracott. Before Toy Darracott, she was like this professor waiting to find out if she had tenure. So we were doing like an anthology of formal poetry and hitting on all the forms and things like that. So I had that, and it was really exciting. And then I think I started recognizing how free verse could be formed. Like you see tons of now. I mean, so many people go to writer camps and things like that and have prompts. And usually I think prompts are often inspired by free verse forms. Like when everybody goes to grad school or something, they would read Ted Kuzer's How to Make Rhubarb Wine, and suddenly everybody has a how-to poem going. And I could recognize that was a form of free verse poetry that could be replicated, but it didn't have to follow the same rules as more formal poetry did.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask one last thing before we do the last poem. Is there a certain poem that you've read by somebody else that's influenced you in your style of writing, maybe, that you borrow the most from? I mean, you mentioned They Feed, They Line, and maybe that's the answer, but is there anything in particular, maybe besides that really informed the way you approach poetry?
Yeah, probably around the same time that I discovered Phil Levine, I discovered the Turkish poet Nazim Hikmet. And probably the cop-out answer is he has this giant book called Human Landscapes, which is a long narrative poem told from multiple perspectives. And I love that. But he also has this really short poem called It's This Way. And it's just about standing. It's a real descriptive poem about standing in a prison in Bursa and smelling carnations outside in the yard. And so it kind of has this real direct physical description. It has a setting, and it gets to the end and it has this like line of insight that being captured is beside the point. The point is not to surrender. And it was kind of, I could start recognizing like a version of that form in other poems where, okay, there's physical description, but there's a moment of insight that a novel would take 20 pages to explain. And he's just like, being captured is beside the point. The point is not to surrender. And that's everything I need to know about, his writing career, his prison career, everything is just tied up in that little direct line. And so that was something that really showed me like, okay, you can have these really poetic lines within really flat descriptive lines that the reader still needs, but then you can enlighten them this whole way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, very cool. That's not something I'm familiar with either, so I'll have to check that out for sure. Well, let's close up. We're about out of time with one last poem, Dave.
So I got to look at the table of contents for this one. This one's called Etheridge Night. It was one of my favorite poems when I first started reading. And Etheridge, I guess, probably most famous for being a prison poet. Came back from Korea, addicted to morphine, ended up in prison, and then got out and wrote some beautiful poems. So this is just called Etheridge Night. In ninth grade, he said, "Fuck this," and got a job shining shoes. To shining shoes, he said, "Fuck this." The pool hall was a hustle that barely paid what it offered. He was one of 7 children in Mississippi. There are blues so deep nobody knows. He bought a drink and didn't stop. Here's a toast. When the ship goes down, swim, motherfucker. The government was willing to pay black kids who were willing to go to war. The drugs in the jungle were the best. Home was different. The destination of America was still unknown. If he wanted to stay high, he needed crime. But 10 to 25 was ridiculous, Your Honor. Mistakes were made, but not devastation. James Baldwin said, "The bitterness which had helped to kill my father could also kill me." It would take a mathematician to write this formula. Race plus addiction plus crime plus incarceration equals art. There are poems so true, they should be called knives.
Yeah. Well, great ending. Great last line to that. Great way to end the show. Thanks so much for being a guest, Dave. It's really been a pleasure having you on. And, so Dave is under the weather a little bit, and wonderful to have him on despite the cold he's got. There you go.
Apologies. I'm glad I made it that long.
You made it. Yeah, the whole show. But yeah, thanks so much again for being a guest. Really great talking to you, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right.
Take care, everyone.
Yep, thanks. And that was Dave Newman. You can find his new book. What we were talking about, the last 3 poems he read were from his new book, Better Than Best American Poetry. You can find that at magicaljeep.com. That's the press is Magical Jeep Press, magicaljeep.com. Find that new book, Better Than Best American Poetry. You can find his other books. The Poem Factory is out from White Gorilla Press, and that's whitegorillapress.com, so find that as well. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem about an echo you've heard more than a few times. That's the prompt. Oh, and also include as many sounds as possible. So that was the prompt for this week. Now, if you'd like to share a poem, and only if you'd like to share a poem, email it first to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com, all one word. And then after that, so I have the poem and I can show it on screen as you're reading it. Find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy on Facebook and YouTube. But only go on Zoom if you would like to share a poem. If you'd like to just listen and enjoy all the poems everybody else has written for this prompt, just sit right where you are, because that's the best place to do it. Also, I should say, it's a 1 page max for poems, and the max time on camera we want it to be about 3 minutes, or less, so we can get to everybody and not be up until midnight hour. So if you have a longer poem, even though it's 1 page, just like jump right in, and that really helps out a lot. Just be wary of other guests. Okay, so go there, email at promptlines@rattle.com, find the Zoom link, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. We've got our poems editor, associate editor, my wife, Katie Dozier. Hey, Katie, how you doing?
Good. I really enjoyed the interview, and especially the accordion metaphor for editing poems. I really liked that. That was really brilliant. I'm going to think about that when I'm editing. Put on some accordion music to inspire me.
Yeah, you'd think, in 290 episodes, we've heard it all, but the accordion is something totally new.
Yeah,
so
it's very exciting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So the prompt this week was to write about an echo you've heard more than a few times with as many sounds as possible. So what'd you do for the prompt?
If it's okay, if I'm allowed to interject and say, I think you should read your poem first because of the order in which we wrote it. It might make more sense.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So because Katie's doing hers. So we are writing. We have a Hyben Crown. We did this last year with Hot Pink Moon, which is a really fun book to put together. Mm-hmm. It's 30 Hyben in 30 days, all linked. And so, this week, Katie took my Hyben. We take the haiku from the Hyben, goes into the prose or other part of the next Hyben. Mm-hmm. And let me make sure people are on mute. I heard some sound. Hang on.
Yeah.
Okay. No, don't do that. Okay, that's better. Okay, so they're all linked together, and then eventually at the end of 30 days, we try to circle back and make a haiku out of the original prose section. So that's tough.
That's going to come on you, as I like
That's
pointing
gonna come
out
on,
every week.
Yeah. Well, you had to do the first poem though, which is hard to.
Well, I
hard
like
to do.
getting things going.
You do.
So
All right. So my poem, and this is the prompt, and I was coming up. I had bioluminescence to work with from your haiku, and I thought. And echoes, that just, it fit really, bioluminescence and echoing, like sonar, you got the fish. And so I just love, I love story, like biology details. And the lanternfish are just fascinating because lanternfish, they are bioluminescent fish. They have this like glow to them that they use for communication, but they also use it to make predators from the bottom look like they're at the surface of the water. So they get confused about that. And that's the main reason they have that bioluminescence on their bellies. But they also have this really fascinating thing where in early sonar, they formed a false bottom of the ocean where people thought that it looked like there was a floor and they had no idea why. And it turns out that these tiny little fish all swimming together at a certain depth made it look like a fake bottom to the ocean. And then they're part of that great migration that comes up and down every night.
Well, you did learn about this.
I did. It was really fascinating.
Yeah, it's great.
And then combine that, like putting all that into one haiku was difficult.
Yeah, I can see why.
But so, or Hyben, I should say. But here you go. This is, anyway, blah, blah, blah. This is my, this is my Hyben. Deep scattering, and it's called the deep scattering layer. Is that layer of almost, it's like 75% of them are lanternfish, although it's some other fish too.
Wow.
But it's the deep scattering layer that those fish occupy. Anyway, deep scattering. Consider the lanternfish, about the size of a paperclip, but 500 billion tons of them spilled in a layer of the twilight zone. When the naval soundmen send their blooping pings into the ocean's depths, they bleep back off the glassy bladders of these tiny fish in a phantom bed that rises in the night and falls every morning. At the same time, on their slender bellies, in beads of bioluminescence, a blue glow mimics the surface of the sea. False floor and false ceiling, they've been fooling us all since the Eocene, and yet we think we're winning the tournament. Echo sounding in the train tunnel, footfalls. So that is my Hyben.
Well, that's great. And I have to say, I really appreciate you putting echo in your haiku so that I could fulfill, I mean, it was predestined by you that I would then fulfill the prompt poem with my response Hyben.
Yeah, I figured we'd play it that way.
It was very kind of you. It
Thank
worked
you.
out well. So even though I did say last week I was determined not to do the prompt poem in combination with the Hyben, but I mean, come on, guys. You got to give me a pass this week for that, right? Okay. So this will be the first poem I've ever rhymed the title with the first word of the poem, possibly the last, but I took my assignment to put as many sounds in seriously. So, pounding. Sounding. I heard you for years before I knew you. Running down the escalator to catch the last train out. Chef's whites on my aching feet and black clogs, leather footfalls on the moving metal. Halfway down, your voice said stop, and I grabbed the armrail, still 100 feet up, just fast enough to keep me from tumbling when the escalator became stairs. Stop, echoed in the night air. But the station was empty, no faces, no crowd, just that familiar apparition of sound. I reined onto the platform, the tunnel's white ceiling grooved like clusters of upside-down tables, a clattering of cutlery making a bell out of my head. What was it the new dishwasher had said? Wet hands all day make our hands so dry at night. The train screeches in, still alive. Knowing, for the first time, mortal and pestle, which you also have to write. Still, you're right. I'm sorry, I start thinking. It's so bad when you start thinking about like future stuff while you're reading a poem. That's a trick to guarantee to screw up reading.
It definitely is. You don't want to daydream while you're reading.
No, I know. I was just thinking, like, I was literally thinking, like, how are you going to put a pestle in your poem for tomorrow? So
It's tricky, but I got that.
I know you've got it. I know. I also want to buy one now that we're writing poems about it. 'Cause
Yeah.
I feel like I want to own one.
Yeah, well, I will tell you, having Googled and Wikipedia'd the pestle, because I was wondering, like, what the point is. Like, why not just
Yeah.
chop it up? It does. It preserves the color better and
Yeah.
makes the flavor come out
Oh,
more
yeah.
when
You
you're
understand
mixing.
the advantages to it.
Yeah,
I just don't
never
own
did.
one.
I thought it was just like, oh, they didn't have a food processor.
And then there are also ways to, like, it really awakens the oils and herbs and things like that. I mean, like making pesto by hand with mortar, even though I can't say it, and pestle is way better than a food processor. It's just different.
Well, very interesting. But anyway, so this Hyben, lots of layers in this. Really cool with
Thank
with
you.
the Ezra pound, the pounding, the footfalls.
Mm-hmm.
Got a lot of stuff going on there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is your goal in a Hyben to get as many possible interpretations?
My goal, and I think I've held this so far in what we've been writing this month, is to have at least 3 different big interpretations. So one of them is, this is a reference to Ezra Pound too, with the no faces, no crowd, to Anastasia of the Metro, which is my favorite poem of all time, and just Imagist in general.
Great little poem.
And then another thing that I won't talk about now.
Okay. All right. Well, that's Katie Dozier's poem, and now I already read mine, so it's time to move on to everybody else, and let's see what everybody else has to share. First up, let's go to Nancy Tennell.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Nancy, good to see you.
I hope everybody's had a great weekend.
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely have.
Well, I have, I put my poem on the prompt line, and Jared, since you're on here, Jared quoted a line that he liked in a stanza. And as I reworked it after Evan Gore's comments, I had taken out that stanza, but just for you, Jared, I put it back in. My poem is Nature is an Echo. Wind whistles through tall grasses, climbs trees to dance through clusters of leaves, their response a soft rustle, like kashishi shakers held in the hands of the music makers. I hear the wind sing, stay with me. The wood thrush repeatedly sings its question, which prompts all the other birds to warble responses. Though every bird is confident in what they are saying, none speak with the beauty of that quodlibet of melodies, sung by the wood thrush to ask continually, stay with me. Pinch the honeysuckle bloom, sip its nectar, savor sweetness on your tongue from a flower that will always open at your touch, much like lovers as they kiss. How sweet the taste of honeyed lips, both lover and flower, sighing, stay with me. Sit on pillow-soft grass by the brook. Remove your shoes, immerse your feet. This is living water on the move, offering rest and a time of refreshing. It splashes and swirls, laughs with you as it entertains you with the unexpected, baptizes you with bubbling gurgles, playfully murmurs, stay with me. In the snippets of sound from busy insects, or the scritch of dry leaves blown about, or perhaps when rain ricochets from the roof and thunder growls when lightning strikes. Every time nature captures our attention to echo a reminder of the order of things, my beloved and I draw close and marvel, glad to be 2 living things who sing and sigh, who murmur and say repeatedly, stay with me.
Oh, that was a beautiful poem,
Yeah,
Nancy.
that
It
really
really
was.
was. Yeah, both in
Thank you.
image and sound, and the meaning at the end too.
Yeah, and I agree with Jared Campbell without even knowing which stanza.
Well, I left that line and then totally rewrote the rest of the stanza.
Oh, okay.
That's the Jared line.
Well, thanks so much, Nancy,
Thanks.
for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's Nancy Tennell with Nature's Echo. Next, let's go to Sean Evaningo Sanders. Hey, Sean, how you doing?
Pretty good. How you guys doing?
I'm good. Great to
Good.
see you.
Well, I had to laugh when I saw this prompt because I just got back from Robert and I took a 12-day road trip, and one of the stops along the way was to visit my granddaughter in San Diego, and this happened during our visit is what my poem's going to be about. So it's kind of fun. Tarabella. While her parents shop for palm trees and birds of paradise, Charlie and I explore water bubblers, the nursery's calico cat, and a ginormous disco ball hanging from the rafters. It's hard to keep up with the 2-year-old when the world is full of wonderment, where all she wants to do is touch, taste test, and toddle off to her next amusement. The magic in playing with children is letting your grown-upness disappear. Before I know it, I'm dunking my head inside the cavern of a 30-gallon glazed ceramic planter. Auga! Auga! Charlie, can you hear the echo? Her shiny gold Mary Jane scurry to put her little head inside next to mine. Her tiny voice. Ah-ooh, ah-ooh. More? More? Shoppers passing by share in our glee as we echo test every planter we see. They say you can't bury your head and ignore the hills of the world. No one said anything about sticking your head in a giant pot to teach your grandchild the magic of sound. When I get home from our vacation, I can resume calling on Congress to impeach the buffoon ruining her future. But for now, I will sing Auga as she sings Au. Joy is its own form of protest, and don't we all need a little more harmony echoing throughout our day? After the earthquake, I text my son, blinking ellipsoid.
Oh, it's great haiku at the end too. Yeah. And I forgot you're in the San Diego area, right? So the earthquake was by
I'm
there?
not, but my son was where we were visiting, and the day after we got home, the earthquake happened. So
Yeah, it was right there in where was that place that we were at? Julian. That's the place.
Spring breaks ago.
Yeah, a couple spring breaks ago. Yeah.
Also, an idea for an upcoming day: going to Home Depot and shouting into the printing bars. I think Charlotte would enjoy that.
We have a video and everything. It was so much fun.
Cute. Oh, that was a great idea. I love it. It sounds fun to me too.
Yeah, definitely. Really fun poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Sean.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was Sean Evaningo Sanders with Terabella. Nice title, too. All right, let's go next to Jeff Stumpo.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. The quick introductions. My Echo is a song I've been listening to since 1995. Fun fact number one, everybody in the music video, other than the band, was either trans or in drag. And fun fact number two, this is a pantoum, but the rhymes are at the beginnings of the lines rather than the ends.
Interesting.
When all in all, we're just like you. I'd come home to Space Hogs in the meantime in high school, somewhat ignorant to its lesson, though I tried, truly. Didn't I join that drag show impromptu when our button-down crew in high school, somewhat ignorant to its lessons, though, showed up at the Outcast house party? Didn't I dance impromptu when our button-down crew rolled in and stuck out? And didn't I mean it when I showed up at the Outcast house party? Didn't I dance for a guy in our group who recoiled, rolled in, and stuck out? And didn't I mean it when I prioritized an old friend with whom I hadn't spoken in years over a guy in our group who recoiled? Later in college, my best friend and roommate, whom I prioritized like an old friend I'd known for years, Gay sang, "We love the all of you." Later in college, my best friend and roommate, who I loved platonically but still with all my heart, gaily sang, "We love the all of you" was a chorus for our chorus. Loved platonically, be still my heart, I learned the collective lessons, was part of the chorus for our chorus. I turned friendship's joy into poetry. I learned the collective lessons, I found the strength to dance. Didn't I join life's drag show? I turned friendship's joy into poetry, and on my last day, I'll go home to Space Hogs in the meantime.
Oh, that was great. Really cool use of the pantoum.
Yeah.
Like the repetitions.
Wanted the poem to echo
really well.
as well as there being
Yeah.
an echo.
Honestly, I have to say I was hoping that somebody would do a formal poem because there is such an opportunity for echo in there, and that was really neat to do the rhymes at the beginning too.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool,
Yeah,
Jeff.
thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah, it was Jeff Stumpo with When All In. Wait, When All In All. We're just like you.
That was like you slipped up and thought we were in a poker poem for a second.
Did. All right. Well, thanks. That was great, Jeff. Next, let's go to a first-time caller. I believe Molly Howes.
I actually came one time before about a year ago.
Ah, well, welcome back. Where are you calling from?
Well, I have this time away from home to write poetry, and that's why I came a year ago, and that's why I'm here today.
Oh, that's
Well,
great.
that's
Yeah,
great.
I do
Means you're
remember that
writing
now.
right now, so that's wonderful.
Definitely
Yay.
does. Yeah.
Exactly. Easter is an echo now, too. Echoing from anti-war youth march, grim men in suits taking down my name. I can shut you up. I can hurt you. rioting black folks, in quotes, Kent State massacre, Nixon sweating and hostile. I can shut you up. I can hurt you. Sexual violence, another sweaty male voice. I can shut you up. I can hurt you. Now hate crimes on the rise, January 6th drumbeat rampage. I can shut you up. I can hurt you. Pregnancy, not yours to decide. Rounded up people have no protection. I can shut you up. I can hurt you. Words and concepts gone silent. Those who've disagreed gone too. I can shut you up. I can hurt you. Reward for turning in your neighbors. McCarthyists can't stand differences. I can shut you up. I can hurt you. In local papers, a church becomes accessible. My DEI role in print alarms me. I can shut you up. I can hurt you. American flags and Easter eggs. You'd better kneel in praise. I will shut you up because I can hurt you.
Yeah, powerful refrain in that poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Molly.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's Molly House. And I hope you get to write and come back again soon,
In less
Molly.
than a year.
Less than a year.
But if it's a yearly thing, we can make a big deal of it. We
That's
can enjoy
true.
ourselves. That's good. I'm glad you're writing.
We definitely can. Yeah, thanks so much, Molly. There's Molly House with Easter is an echo now, too. All right, let's go next to Jared Campbell. Hey,
Hello.
Jared.
Hi.
So what do you got for us?
What is an echo that follows me around no matter where I go? So, unison. Do you smell the lilac morning sunshine? Spring has opened like a daffodil. The creek is babbling to sleepy earth. Robins sing to pollen-giddy air. Squirrels chase each other through the pear tree, their scritchings followed by a blossom fall. 10,000 voices sing the same hymn. Linda, 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 Linda.
Yeah, another sweet poem. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that,
Thanks.
Jared. Yeah. Yeah, it was Jared Campbell with Unison. Next, let's go.
I heard
to-
Nivi's here.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yeah.
I saw the little note out of the corner of my eye. Let's go to Nivedita while she's on break from work. I assume.
Hello.
Hey, Nivi.
Hi.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Hey,
Hey,
good.
great. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah. So, what do you got for us this week?
It's sort of a slightly humorous poem. It's about how when we were young, we used to go shopping for our parents, right, to get like groceries and stuff. And you know how spices are a big deal in India. So, things like curry leaves and coriander. So those are things that mom used to always remind you to pick up on the way back. And in many vegetable stores here, you usually get things like coriander and curry leaves for free. Like if you purchase for say a certain amount, then they just give you a handful of it for free.
Oh, interesting.
So this is about how, despite her saying it and despite it being in my head, I still forgot to buy it. So the echo is buy some coriander, but then, of course, I ended up forgetting it. Street Symphony. Don't forget the coriander, echoes from the balcony above. Cutting through scooter horns, a coconut thud, and the flower seller's price war with a passing mummy. A school kid drums Bollywood songs into a steel tiffin box, while temple bells clang like overexcited punctuation marks. Two cars honk argue in reverse, while a grey cat slowly flumps into a sack of cement. Even the crows on the trees seem to me to caw the reminder, coriander, coriander. And still, I walk home empty-handed.
That's great. So many sounds in that poem, too. Wonderful job.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I
Thank
love the
you.
playfulness. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Nivi. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yep. Have a good
Have a
day.
good day.
Yeah.
Thank
There's
you.
Nivi DeKarthik with a Street Symphony. Yeah. There's someone, Jared says coriander is a wonderful word. I do love the sound of that word. It's
And
one of
the
those
taste
just fun to
of
say.
coriander.
Yeah, well, that
it
too.
is. Like,
Let's go to another, I think, first-time caller, Linda Frith. Hey, Linda, are you
Hi,
there? Hello.
there I am.
Hi.
There I am. I actually was here once before a few months ago and read a poem, but I come every week. Mostly I just listen.
Well,
But
glad to
this
have you
one,
coming on again. Yeah.
thank you. I tried and tried to write a poem about echoes. I worked really hard on it. And then yesterday I was in another group and the prompt, my title, prompt was the prompt, and all this other just came. So here it is.
Okay.
This is what I know. I know sounds of laughter, echoes of my sister's voice, heard each morning as I comb my hair, the echoes of her curls in my own wavy hair. Each echolocation rests in my body like it has for the 75 years she sistered me. The echoes of the growl of the frisky Pekingese simmer in the ear as little princess waits by the door for Sissy to return. I know these reverberations of sound crackle, crash, creak, thud, as pockets of memory singing her lullaby to me. I know that birth and rebirth are cycles meant to carry us through the winter. Even the sound of melancholy is an echo of our lost desire. And when we meet again in some bold hereafter, we will know, both of us, what we have gained.
Yeah, I love that ending, the understatedness of it. Yeah, thanks so much for
the
sharing
line
that.
with melancholy in the end is really good, too. I really like that.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you can come back on again soon, but thanks for listening every week, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was Linda Meg Frith with This Is What I Know. Next, let's go to Hemet Malik.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Hemet, how you doing tonight?
Very well, thank you. Okay, I had fun with this one, just pulling it up. Upending the pinball machine. My ears are tired of sounds sent once that stayed locked in this cavern of repeat, bouncing off the bumpers of my glassed-in head. An arcade game for the gods, going hard for a tilt. I should clang a bell each time one hits its mark. The hiss of the day I grasped we were poor, the caw of a white magpie swooping. The peal of the ticket seller's bell outside each future past man. Murmurs soft as gases behind pale hands. The dark bruises of echoes form again and again. My own sideshow symphony. The conductor has swapped his snapped baton for a cat o' nine tails. The Easter shoppers at Big W have stripped the shelves of chocolate rabbits. Only those with nibbled ears remain. I stand still with my basket in this hall of mirrors aisle. Every year, Easter again. My eyes are pulling up that faraway look. Oh, sorry, my word has stopped. I can't load the rest of it.
Well, I can finish it for you if you can't.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my eyes
Thank you,
are pulling up that faraway look the jaded have. Give me a wide sky where nothing replays, where the wind-up monkey sits aghast with his cymbals stopped, as I float on billows of feathered sounds, the glass smashed, and all these marbles thudding on the ground, damping in their last wax. Yeah, so great. Great poem. Great use of the imagery throughout, really, and the sound too. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Hemet. Yeah, that was Hemet Malik with Upending the Pinball Machine, and there's some echoes for you there.
Yeah, a lot of sounds there too. It's really interesting how much you get used to how many sound references people who read on the prompt lines have, generally, and then to hear a lot more in poems is fun and exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go next to Dick Westheimer.
We'll see if he did that too.
Yeah, we'll see. Hey, Dick.
We'll see. I was. I'll get to the poem pretty quickly, but I was listening to your poem, Tim, about bioluminescence, and had an experience once of being in a dark sky place with bioluminescence in the water below
Oh
and
yeah.
completely horizon to horizon dark stars, dark skies
Oh,
above.
where was that? I want to go there.
Yeah, well, it was north of San Francisco. I'm trying to remember the name of the bay.
Hmm.
But it was very rare experience because they only take you out on these bioluminescent kayak rides when there's no moon
Oh yeah.
because you
Hmm.
can't see, and it's cloudy up there, 9 days
Yeah,
out of
good
10.
point. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
wow.
the day we were there was just like,
Well, I imagine it like being one of those infinity mirror rooms. That.
yeah, it was. If I didn't ache so much from being in the kayak so long, I might have experienced it that way. But it's still magical in my mind.
Mm.
To have seen it. And one note on I just love Dave's poetic voice. It's sort of like if one of the goals of writing is sort of like to remove all pretense
Hmm.
uh, from our work. It's just
Mm-hmm.
his work was zero pretense, which I really
Yeah.
love.
Yeah,
Nice.
definitely. Hmm.
Um, so, in the beginning days of despots, everything's about despotism and fascism for me these days. They just It used to be my wife would walk into my poems. Now it's fascism. So here we go. In the beginning days of despots, the tick hounds howl echo up from the creek. It's 3 a.m. and we are asleep, our bedroom window thrown open to the muggy night. For the first time in 40 years, a hound dog chorus rises from the ravine. Locals once ran their hunting pups down in the bottoms most summer nights. The dogs treed raccoons and bawled their baritone yowls until the bead-eyed varmints were brought down by a bullet or bow. Pissed as we were at being awoken, there was joy in those sounds, and I didn't much mind the good old boy's trespasses, as I was a newcomer in these parts. But now I hear there are agents on the prowl, and who knows who or what they are hunting down. The dogs keep their noses to the ground. It's their handlers I hear howl.
Yeah, good use of the extended metaphor in that,
Yeah,
Dick. Yeah.
definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's such a howl is such a great word to echo because you have yowl and growl and you have all these owl
Yeah.
sounds that
Yeah.
can find their way into the prompt. And one thing I was thinking, Katie, is that my memory is getting better because of your prompts. It's like you have these prompts and I go, what the fuck am I going to write about? And then a memory just sort of like it's back that I otherwise would not have had any relationship to. And those
Oh.
coonhounds running the creek, that's an awesome
It
memory.
sounds memorable to me for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, definitely. And that's what, poetry is all about, or one of the things is
Hmm.
pulling those things up and saving them. Thanks for sharing
Yeah,
that, Dick.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep. All right. That was Dick Westheimer with The Beginning Days of Despots. Now let's go to David Boos next.
Hello. Nice to be
Hey,
here again.
Yeah, great to see
nice
you.
to see you
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, sometimes the prompts work for me and sometimes they don't. So this one. So so because of where I live and where I recreate, the many different sounds that ravens make, have sort of echoed through my entire life. And then last week, I was able to be part of a conversation with Erin Murphy, and she was talking about her demi-sonnets, the form that she came up with. And so what came out of all of that was this. It's called Ravens Three Ways. Desert. Morning sun shatters on canyon walls and falls into our campsite like mist. Twisted pods of mesquite rattle their agitation, while above the rim, a black cross races its shadow at the edge where rock meets sky. Their groks drift down in pairs, the one from the stone just after the one from the air. Mountain. There's nothing here not covered in snow. Firs slump like tilted monuments in a graveyard that the wind whistles past on its weightier bones. But at the summit, a dozen ravens dance, their rattling laughter rising and falling with them. Buoyed by the thin air and cold light, who knows what they live on, unless it's joy. Forest. Here, you only hear them. The groks filter like rain through the green curtained canopy. Sit and listen for the swoosh, swoosh of heavy wings, maybe a gurgle in passing. Wait, and you may hear them warble their mutual greetings, the guttural mutters and clicks that are the diction of their dark affection.
Yeah, beautiful set of demi-sonnets there, and I love the focus on the raven and the different ways to go about. Where is it that you live with all those different landscapes full of ravens?
Well, so some of those I've traveled to. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I live in Eastern Washington, so I'm often in the mountains. And ravens are just lots of places. And so you see them in the desert, you see them in the mountains, you see them in the forest. So, yeah.
Well, very cool.
Playing football in Baltimore, even on occasion.
you can see them there too.
That's the fourth way.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah. Thanks so much, David. Yeah, that was really cool. Great noticing there. Yeah.
Thank you. Yep.
There's David Boos with Ravens Three Ways. Next, let's go to Amanda Harris.
All right. So I had been doing a lot of performance art lately, and that brings its own level of noise. And, you begin to think about the relationship that noise has to silence. So this poem is called Afterlife. The afterlife has a way of hissing and then pretending it has not offended. Like ritual, or maybe something similar, it pounds on the door of chastity and expects a knock, knock, knock in response. Sounds are frigid things. Living is a philosophy belonging to the strange and bold.
Very strong last line there.
Yeah.
And great reading as always, Amanda. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. That was Amanda Harris with Afterlife. Let's go to Stephen Croft next.
Hey, Tim and Katie.
Hey.
Hey, Stephen. How you doing?
Doing good. My echo is in nature, like Nancy's and Jarrett's and a few others. Where I live, it's coastal, and there are lots of live oaks, which are kind of a centerpiece in the forest because they're really large, and they seem like they're the strong, silent types in the forest. But, are they really? So that's
I love that entry. I'm always personifying trees. So that's great.
Right. So this is the voice of the live oak. When the world spins in chaos, I sit on a garden bench I built from 2x4s and backed into a line of overgrown azaleas by the grave of a favorite cat, Piglet's bench, and stare at the hard limbs of an oak rising implacable like the sun. And I'm without problems, significant under its centuries. If I could talk to the tree, it would listen like it listens to the red-bellied woodpecker's call, to the wind rustling the long ovals of its leaves. And if it spoke in its stillness an echo of peace, a soft, soothing vibe, chirping trill of tree crickets as backup singers, I decide it does speak this way, speak its message of evening calm while it listens like I listen to the call of a red-bellied woodpecker, to the wind rustling the long ovals of its leaves.
Yeah, great descriptions and sounds for sure. I love that
nice.
chorus of the backup
I
singers.
know. I picture them in doo-wop outfits.
Right. Yeah, I'm a real devotee of that one particular live oak, but I'm lucky to have quite a few on my property.
Yeah, well,
That's
beautifully put.
wonderful.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that,
Thanks.
Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen Croft with the voice of the live oak. Let's go to Chelsea McGlynn next.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Chelsea. Good to see you.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna go ahead and read my poem. It doesn't have a title. It has the title. I title all my poems before I have a title. So
That's
this poem,
a little insight into the process right there.
Yeah.
this poem is about echoes. It's a double allergy pill kind of day because I was outside snorting yellow lines of pollen, whether my immune system liked it or not. I could metaphor my body, rename my T cells ice agents who see cat dander as murderers and mold spores as rapists. Soon they don't care who's a citizen, I warn my thyroid. Your DNA won't save you when they eliminate due process. But this isn't that kind of poem. I want to tell you instead that Daniel Kish taught himself to echolocate. He lost his eyes to cancer and then began to click his tongue and listen to the echoing clicks well enough to hike and mountain bike. He's taught over 7,000 blind people how to navigate. And that vampire bats notice when their neighbors haven't fed. It only takes 3 hungry nights for one to be close to death. But when they squeak out their pain, other bats bring back blood to feed those friends. And that my dog, whose ashes I buried today, and dirt turned yellow from oak pollen, taught me with each of her panting breaths and whump of tail against legs, how to echo love back and forth, to repeat and reverberate these same words to everyone she met, whether stranger or friend. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Oh, what a beautiful poem. That definitely is.
really
Thanks so much for
beautiful.
sharing that, Chelsea.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah, and I love that story of what was his name again? Daniel Kish.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that at all.
It's amazing. I
Wow.
watched a documentary about him
Yeah.
once.
Oh, really? You
and
did?
a
I
short
heard-
one. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
I want to learn more.
But yeah, he learned how to echolocate. And he's riding his bike.
That's
it's
so
amazing.
inspiring.
Yeah, it is. Thanks so much for sharing that beautiful
Thank
poem,
you.
Chelsea. Yeah, it was Chelsea McGlynn with For Now, this poem is about echoes. I
Honestly,
love
like
that
you
too.
could do worse as a title than just like laying it out there. Like at least it's not trying to be like it's not winking at you.
Yeah.
You know? Like
It's not bad. I'd take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Tina Denetclaw next.
Okay.
Hey, Tina.
Hey, nice to see you guys.
Yeah, great to see
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really appreciated Chelsea's poem, but it's no fair making me cry right before I'm supposed to read the poem.
Aw. Well, that's dangerous.
I really felt that was what a lovely poem.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna go straight in because this was gonna be hard for me anyway.
Okay.
So here we go. Soft laughter wafted through the house, ascending steps from our basement, in smooth, rich tones that echoed my brother's deep, lush voice. He was reading David Copperfield and spent the afternoon in delight. Curious, I stood next to his bed where he reclined with his book. What's funny? Oh, you just have to read it yourself. I saw that book 50 years later, clutched on his own son's bookshelf. He has his father's love of reading. His rounded eyes, just blue instead of brown. His temperament, his smile, his voice, his sense of fun. As a teenager, my nephew once broke thoughtful silence, singing to himself, I want some fun piled on a bun, I want a manwich, please. Perfect pitch, called out with ease. My brother's echo. My brother's granddaughter. Sorry, has his eyes, just hazel, his love of books, his sense of fun, but her long smile comes from her mother, her grandmother, and her great-grandfather before them all. I am an echo of my father's mother, who was an echo of her mother, who was an echo of her mother before us all. A woman's unborn daughter holds the egg that will become the granddaughter. 3 generations caressed beneath one soft hand.
Oh, very sweet as always, Tina. Thanks so much for sharing
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, Chelsea, for your poem. It really is lovely.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks, Tina.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's Tina Denetclaw with Precious Echoes. Let's go next to Mike Bales.
Good evening. I thought you were going to have a little company today. I've been busy, and the roommate's cat didn't have any lap time, so he's was hanging around when I was doing a workshop earlier and hanging out earlier.
That's really
Plus, there's
sweet.
storms, and I think he's a little bit scared.
Aw.
This poem has to do with last night. It also, since karaoke has to do with sound, it's a karaoke poem.
Nice. I was hoping for some more karaoke poems.
Yeah.
We don't get enough
Well,
of those.
gotta have them. What the world needs now is love and more karaoke poems. It's called Reverb. A light shone on me as the amplifier took my voice and layered it onto itself, as the song became something more than a melody, as I sang a Beatles song from 60 years ago. I brought it back to life, but realized it had never died. It had never died, the melody touching my heart, as it did when I was a child and patrons applauded. Patrons applauded as fans cheered more than 60 years ago at the Ed Sullivan Show or at Shea Stadium and lived in conversations. Living in conversations are snippets of life of patrons at the bar on a Saturday night. On a Saturday night, balls and a pool table crashed against each other, and after each bad shot, couples laughed. Couples laughed, the language of love, I presumed. I took in the soft voice of the bartender as I paid my bill.
Yeah, but I love that last stanza.
Yeah.
Especially. I mean, that's almost its own poem right there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it was neat seeing these couples there, and pool, I imagine, is a very mundane thing, but the way they help each other, the way they laugh when they make bad shots.
Oh.
One person is kind of clowning around to me going, I'm terrible at this. And it's all taking part while karaoke is going on.
Oh, that sounds great. You do make me want to go to bars more often.
There you go.
The karaoke sounds
I
so
think
much
you need
fun,
permission now.
Yeah, I
He
think
has.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
All right, yeah, that was Mike Bales with Reverb. Let's go to Christiana Doucette next.
Hello.
Hey, Christiana, great to see you.
Hi, it's great to see you too. I have a shorter one tonight. It's a sonnet. And I'm going to music nerd just a little bit first. Because I grew up playing the piano, and so as I was thinking about echoes, I kept thinking about how when you press the damper pedal down, all the sounds echo against each other, and I was thinking about overtones. I was also thinking about like the growing protests that have been happening. I live in South Carolina, and we're not really known for protests a whole lot, but I've been to my third one since February, was yesterday, and it was a historic one for our area. We had almost 2,000 people, and I was thinking about all of those things together. I think I need to adjust the title of this just a little bit to reflect that better, but I tried to give it a tiny bit with the key changes. The one thing I wanted to note here, down near the end, it's going to talk about the strings being felt and felt, because the tip of the hammer in a piano is covered with felt. And so when you drop the damper pedal and are no longer pressing it down, the felt lands on the keys and silences them. But if it's pressed down, it lifts up off the keys, and you can hear all the sounds echoing off of each other. And any one note you play is going to be picked up by all the other strings that are close to the same tone.
That's really interesting.
Like I was literally just thinking about that, like last week. I was like, how does that damper pedal work?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, now
Now I know. Thanks.
So it's pretty cool. There's your little bit of music stuff today. So this is, for now, Sonnet of Key Changes. Sometimes there is a melody alone that sings a voice into the waiting air. Sometimes it strikes a chord whose leading tone pulls more toward resolve than to despair. But when the soul holds the damper down, then all the overtones wrung from the keys of minor movements played echo around the sounding board in chiming frequencies. For what's been struck peals more than just the note. The score that multiplies vibrating strings will not still till they're felt. The antidote strikes sympathetic tones and softly brings the stage to stillness. Then is peace and rest. Sometimes the power lies in what's not pressed.
Oh, yeah, great couplet. Yeah, great use of that full
Yeah.
stop and then the full line to close out the poem.
And I'm so grateful when someone who's an expert at something can pull a metaphor in that I can understand without totally fully understanding still the conversation about the damper, even though I want to. But that was great.
You can go look it up. It's really interesting because I think it's interesting how they work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of like inverse of how you would think it works in a way, because it's like releasing.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was thinking
Yeah.
when you were describing it, Christiana. I was like, wait, but that's the opposite. Wait, but now it's all coming together.
Yeah,
Thanks.
fascinating.
Yeah, so the
great use of
hammer
the
still has to
metaphor.
hit each key.
Right.
But that felt part that's keeping it from playing all the notes.
Right.
Yeah. I'm probably explaining it really poorly, and
No,
some
you're
other
not. You're
music
not.
person's
Yeah, well,
gonna get
I
on here and be
totally
like,
got it.
No, it's
let me
great.
explain how it really goes.
All right, well, thanks so much, Christiana.
Thanks.
It's a really
Yeah.
cool sonnet. Yeah, appreciate it. As Christiana Doucette with a sonnet of key changes. And last but definitely not least is, I think, Kimberly Gibson Tran. Hey, Kimberly, thanks so much for your
Hi.
patience waiting it out.
No problem. I went first last time, so it's only fair.
Yeah, I probably spent too much time stressing about the order.
Yeah, you
'Cause
too.
I'm trying to remember like who was earlier and who was later, and trying to be random at the
Yeah.
same time.
I'll say
Anyway.
though, since Kimberly is last, I want to pay her a compliment and say I was telling Tim the other day how much your comments on Critique of the Week are so on fire. Like they're so wonderful and great. You have so many of them, and they're so excellent.
Thank you. I just love reading poems and reacting to them.
Yeah, it's fun.
So it's fun. Critique is what I love.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I brought a narrative poem, but now after your interview with Dave, I'm wondering if it has plot.
Yeah, that was an interesting
That
discussion.
was another interesting.
Yeah, it
the
was.
accordion and the plot
the
versus
plot, yeah.
What is it? Plot versus narrative? Is
Plot
that what
versus narrative
or
and
story?
plot has a gun. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I interpreted the sound as repeating a vowel sound. So,
Okay.
all right. Toward. Mom and I and the pastor and youth group piled with ski cargo in the church van. We were eating marshmallows, humming along to songs, though it's possible Mom and I had one of our throwdowns at the lodge that morning. It was a long drive home from the slopes, and the Colorado road was edged with ice and wisps of snow. It was slow going whenever Pastor drove. To pass the boredom, we high schoolers huddled near the back row, playing a game of would you or wouldn't you rather, using the gathered data to impose on each other's judgments and morals. Would you or wouldn't you run toward an explosion to save a stranger, a child, someone you know? So easy to claim you do the ethical thing in this scenario. Then, out the back window, we gasped as a trailer slid out of control, rolled off the shoulder, and slammed on its side. Smoke billowed. Mom was sprinting before I knew we'd stopped still. Like a rogue black widow, she leaped on the truck, hoisted herself to the door window facing up. A pair of hands raised a bundle through the hole, a little baby. For a second, I saw the echo, her checking the limbs, counting fingers and toes.
Oh wow, what a story! Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, great storytelling in that, and really,
Great title too.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Kimberly. Yeah, it's Kimberly Gibson Tran with Toward. Yeah, great stuff today all around. Let's see and double check, make sure we got everybody who's here on the Zoom. We did. Okay, let's do Ted Guevara's poem, which is always interesting. We have a photo like we usually do, and this is looks like a painting of a woman, the Victorian type painting, yet with a she's on fire.
Her shoulder's on
Her
fire.
shoulder, or,
yeah. And she looks
interesting.
very chill about it.
She does look chill. It's like she's not really bothering her. Just like
Yeah.
hanging out with half me on fire.
We've been
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. And here's the poem. Echo Trade Store. Sell your heartbeat. The sign may be flickering, but we're open. We'll adjust the rhythm to go slow according to wicked aftermath. The lub can take things slow now. Now that you have walked away from the fire, cool rejoining ease, and from the valve closing, the dub surrenders all. Nothing else to sort out. But then you still look back, you still turn around and contemplate selling your soul. Profound poem there from Ted Bernal-Rivera. That was Echo Trade Store. Thanks as always, Ted, for sharing that. And that is going to wrap up the show. Let's do the coup.
Now
I have to
on
always
this mission to call it just the coup. Like haiku's not a small enough word.
I don't know. Well, since you pointed it out, I feel obliged.
I kind of like the coup though.
Yeah. So here's the coup, and you might have noticed I've done a lot of these about the lizards. And I was like, why do I keep writing about the lizards? I just never lived any place with lizards. So
I
it's
think
like
it's
fascinating
exciting. I mean, I know how many lizards we're seeing on a daily basis. I think it's totally makes sense.
Those little anole gecko-like things. They're so cute, and they just do so much with
They're
their
getting a little big to be cute these days.
Yeah,
frankly, they're growing in this area.
It's true, they have. Okay, well, anyway, here is, and you witnessed this one too.
Yeah.
So this is the coup.
I thought you're gonna. Honestly, I guessed you're gonna write.
Well, definitely. Yeah, why not? The end of his tail in the heron's beak. So this is one of the ones.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
I was thinking though, that's got to be like a deja coup, right? Someone's got to have written the end of his tail
I don't know.
as a metaphor there
I
being
haven't
in
seen
some other.
tail, but I mean, it does feel like it should be.
It feels like it's kind of cliche, to be honest. But I've
never seen it, and I've read for the One Art Anthology like 2,000 haiku plus modern haiku. I probably read like 4,000 haiku this month, and I haven't seen it.
Oh, I thought there was a chance it was original enough to share it anyway. So the end of his tail in the heron's beak, and that was right out the window right there. A big white heron landed into our
front yard, which we had never seen before. This isn't like a normal thing that we have heron. I mean, we have herons around the area,
they're in the
but not
ponds
really in our
here,
front yard. Yeah.
Yeah. Then something was hanging out of his beak, and
then there was a little bit of a
we
struggle.
were hoping it was a snake, but it turned out to be one of those little lizard guys.
Yeah.
Poor guy. But the heron was well fed, and that was the end of his tail, and that is the end of the show. See how that works?
You'll just have to. You should deja vu coup yourself, and next week just keep doing the end of his tail. It's a snake next week.
All right. Well, that is the coup for this week. That is the show for this week. Now, of a special note, next week we will not be here live, sort of, because next week's episode of the Rattlecast is going to be this right here, our conversation with Dean Radin, which was from Rattle number 86, the winter issue of Rattle. We like to release these when it's not with a poet. It's just a podcast episode. Katie and I are going to be in at the Poetry at the Round Top Festival then. So we're not going to make it back in time for the show. I'm going to have a lot of fun there, teaching some classes and doing some other stuff. And Mark Doty's there, some other people.
Kim Stafford. And
yeah.
Really fun.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So we're going to be there. But at the regular time, live is going to be, like I said, the airing is a live premiere, they call it, where you can actually do the chat window if anybody wants to hang out and still chat with each other, talking about Dean Radin. Now, Dean Radin is that really the world's, we talked to the world's best neuroscientist, in my opinion, in Ian McGilchrist. We talked to, for the upcoming issue in the summer, the best food writer in Ruth Reichel. This is weirdly the best paranormal researcher. Now, Dean Radin, if you didn't read that interview, he studies psychic phenomenon in a way that's really serious. He worked at the Pearl Lab in Princeton and a whole bunch of other places, his own institute of noetic sciences, and he put some real science behind that weird aspect of poetry where it sort of predicts the future and sees things that we don't see, and maybe it's just our psychology sneaking up on us, but maybe there's more to it. And so we explored it talking to Dean Radin.
And another best about that live premiere is that it, unbeknownst to you, features the best poet interviewer, which is you.
Oh, well, thanks, Katie. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun to talk to Dean, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation next week. Now, after that, the guest the following week, May 4th, is we're back live with a regular show featuring Dion O'Reilly. A past guest is coming back because she's got a cool book and some interesting things to talk about. Limerence. Do you know what the word limerence means, Katie?
I do not. I was just trying to work out if I did, and I was coming close. Like, it's one of those that would be fun to guess on, but I don't know what it means.
That is an obsession with unrequited love.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's an interesting book, and she's going to talk about other things that are interesting too. That's Rattlecast number 291, 2 weeks from now, Sunday, May 4th. Next week, though, we'll be right here, technically, with Dean Radin with that live premiere, and no prompt for that. We skipped the prompt because I was like jumping. Go back. So the prompt for 2 weeks from now, I was so careful to explain all that we can do the prompt.
Well, I forgot to.
Yeah. So the prompt for 2 weeks from now, though, is going to be what, Katie?
Okay. The prompt is to write about a time you do someone else's job and found the results surprising.
Yeah, so really fun, work-oriented prompt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that should be really interesting. So write a poem about a time you had to do someone else's job and found the results surprising.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 2 weeks to write it, because once again, we're going to do the old Dean Radin, then we're going to do the Dion O'Reilly in 2 weeks with the prompt line. So you got 2 weeks to write that poem. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, or 2 weeks in the meantime, and we'll talk to you soon. We'll be back with Poet Respond too. Wait, no, we won't be back with Poet Respond. No, not Poet Respond. Critique of the Week will be off this week too.
Yes, that's
because we're going to be driving out to the Round Top, which is like 2 hours from here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to be here live. So we're going to miss the Critique of the Week and miss the other thing.
New Poetry
we'll
Space
miss you, though.
on Friday.
New Poetry Space
We'll
if you're
love
sad.
that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do it on the Poetry Space on limericks.
Yeah, on limericks.
So that should be fun. But anyway, yeah, a lot of stuff going on next week. So hope you hang tight, and we'll see you in 2 pretty much. Take care, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.